Well, good morning. Welcome to Farm Bureau's 6th annual trade report. We bring this to you every year, talking about just the importance of trade in Nebraska, which is very substantial. I'm Mark McHargue, president of Nebraska Farm Bureau. I live on a fourth-generation farm in Central City, Nebraska. We do both organic and conventional farming on corn, soybeans, popcorn. We also have a hog operation. To me, the value of trade is just really hard to articulate, and hopefully by the end of the time that you'll have a better understanding. Trade in Nebraska accounts for almost 30% of all the ag receipts that we get in for Nebraska. 30%, think about that, is attributed to trade. Nebraska is the 5th largest agricultural trading state, so if you put all the states together, we rank the 5th highest in trade for ag products. 2021 was a record year again for exports and agricultural commodities. Is worth $9.2 billion. Now we talk about billions a lot these days. Actually talk about trillions when we get into the federal conversation. But to put it in perspective, our state's just budget, what happens to run our state is about $5+ billion. So we're almost double that in just the value of ag exports in Nebraska, which is very substantial. So just a little bit on my farm, I talked about we raise corn, soybeans, we raise popcorn. I had the opportunity to be in Japan last November, and the popcorn that we raised on our farm, that company was selling to a theater that we were actually at, selling popcorn to the customers in Japan. And that was just a good reminder that the things that I grow on my farm doesn't necessarily just go to a local processor, it goes around the world. Even in our beef sector, we're the #1 beef exporter for 10 years running out of Nebraska. Japan, for example, also one of our top beef importers of Nebraska beef. So just a number of things. Austin Harthoorn, he's our Nebraska Farm Bureau economist. He's going to walk you through some of the numbers that we're going to be talking about today. So, Austin?
Hi, everyone. As Mark said, my name is Austin Harthoorn. I'm the new economist here at Nebraska Farm Bureau, and I'm here to run through the numbers of the trade report. The report was created by Jay Rempe, a former economist here at Nebraska Farm Bureau, but he is with Rolling Prairie Economics, where he started a consulting firm there. So these, I want to stress before I get into this, that these are 2021 numbers. 2022 numbers will be out later this year. And actually, U.S. overall numbers are out, and those numbers look good. But for the purpose of this, these are 2021 numbers. And I'm about to throw a lot of numbers at you, so we'll get into this. Nebraska exports overall shattered the record from any of the previous years. Like Mark said, $9.2 billion this year, with the previous record being around $7 billion. That puts Nebraska as a state overall 5th in ag exports nationally. And just, doing really well overall in terms of exports. We can break this down by commodity. Have a graph over there. Corn took the top overall spot this year, almost doubling from where we were last year, increased 98%. Soybeans held solid at #2. It was fairly level year over year. We set a record last year, so we maintained that level this year. And then beef was 3rd. It grew at 40% this year. Had a very good year for beef exports. As Mark said, this was also the 10th consecutive year for Nebraska being the top state in beef exports. So we're looking good there. We also saw some growth in some of the minor categories for Nebraska exports, such as veggie oils, soybean, meal, pork, wheat, stuff like that. So doing well overall across the board. We can break this down by county level and look at where production happens and where exports are being taken out of. And you can see this chart over there. Soybeans are the top export for much of eastern Nebraska. Corn dominates much of central Nebraska, and beef dominates west Nebraska, with a few counties having, out west in the Panhandle, having top exports in wheat. But those are kind of the highlights of the report. I'll kind of go into some takeaways, or my personal takeaways from what I gather. So we had big export records this year, specifically in beef and corn. And we can talk about why that is, and a lot of it has to do with trade expansion in countries such as Mexico and China. In the news a lot lately, no surprise. From 2020 to 2021, corn exports to China grew at 300%. In beef, they grew up 400%. They became a huge importer of beef, and that's new. Switching over to Mexico, corn exports grew at 76% there, and that's significant for Nebraska. Almost 90% of our corn goes towards Mexico. So you start thinking about this trade deal with Mexico, and you can kind of see the fallout there and how much impact it can have on Nebraska. But those two countries, a lot of Nebraska exports and U.S. exports go to those countries. So trade relations there are going to be a big deal going forward, specifically for Nebraskans. So I mentioned all these numbers, but we can really start to wonder why this matters for Nebraskans, and I can break that down here for you. Global trade's impact has a huge importance here in Nebraska. As Mark said, about 30% of exports, 30% of state receipts are exports. And I can break that down into commodities. If you look at the value by crop of exports, soybeans is $7 per bushel valued to exports. Corn is around $170 per bushel. And for a beef cow, $260 of that is derived from export value. Breaking this down to the farm level, you can see around $200,000 of a farm's revenue being attributed to exports specifically. And that thereby goes into local economies there and revitalizes and makes them more resilient. So overall, I just really want to stress exports have a big deal here locally in Nebraska. And it's easy to think about just taking corn to the local elevator or taking cattle to the local sale barn. But beyond that line of vision, there's big impacts happening, and that's what I really want to stress here. So, but for now, I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Well, thank you, Austin. I appreciate that. Just a lot of numbers, and we'll certainly have the trade report available, the full trade report available to those of you that are here and also those of you that are online. We want to welcome you as well. But we know that trade doesn't actually happen in a vacuum. There's a lot of policies that are around trade to enable us to trade with partners from around the world. We are privileged to have Congressman Adrian Smith here with us this morning. Adrian is on the Ways and Means Committee, is also the chairman of the Ways and Means Trade Subcommittee. And I can tell you that if anybody in Washington on the House side of the equation, Adrian is the guy, the top guy that understands and is a senior in the trade conversation. So, Adrian, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be out of Washington and back on the front lines of our economy, as I like to say, visiting producers and various work sites around the 3rd District. And I thank you for having me here today to talk about trade. When it comes to trade, we're either gaining or we're losing. I don't think there's anything like treading water, so to speak, on trade. And I feel like we're losing ground right now because trade does not seem to be a priority from President Biden. You take the situation with Mexico. Agriculture was, I think, instrumental with North American Free Trade Agreement some years ago. Benefited from that, and when the notion came up that it would be renegotiated, there was some concentration on let's make sure we do no harm and lose the advancements that we have made. And so a lot of folks leaned into the discussion about USMCA. Biotechnology was key. Definitely with Canada and Mexico and USMCA, biotechnology needed to be there because it wasn't there with NAFTA. Mexico agreed to accept our GMO product, and now they're saying they won't take it. This is something that's been happening for some time now. I'm glad that the administration is finally taking action, to the formal action that can be a little bit cumbersome and time-consuming. I wish it would have started some time ago. I wish that President Biden would take a stage anywhere with any kind of background, to take a podium on a stage and say what Mexico is doing is not right. Now, from the previous administration, having trade, leveling that playing field of trade as such a high priority, and then leaving office and presenting actually the Biden administration with some great opportunities on trade, The Biden administration has chosen not to take advantage of those, whether it's trade with Kenya, pushing for trade with the UK and to include agriculture as well, very important component there. The numbers speak for themselves. Austin pointed out that, for example, exports to China have increased over the last few years, but especially with that push during the previous administration to really level the playing field and enforce the agreements that are in place. That is always key. You don't really have a trade agreement without enforcement. And so we need to lean forward, to really lean in on the trade issue and encourage the president to do the same. It is absolutely vital. We have lapsed trade policies that would help our supply chain, and yet they've been lapsed for more than 2 years. So now that there's a new majority in the House, I think we can change that. But we've lost ground, make no mistake. We have lost ground over the last couple of years as it relates to trade. So we need to take advantage of these opportunities of, for example, Kenya being eager to engage in a trade agreement with us. They're not the largest market per se, but they can help tee up good policies to spread across the continent of Africa. And there are just so many opportunities. The list is long, but we all need to lean in on trade. I'm glad the Nebraska Farm Bureau understands this. They see the numbers, they produce the numbers, and they take action. So thank you for gathering us here today. It's important that we have these conversations to elevate the profile of trade, because it's not just important to Nebraska farmers and ranchers per se, but it's about feeding America. It's about an economy in our country that we want to expand and grow and provide more opportunity, and it's about helping feed the world in a substantive way, in an economically viable way as well. So I see huge opportunity on the horizon. It's up to us to take advantage of that. Thank you.